A Child is Born, A Beginner's Guide to Nativity Stories by Amy Jill Levine. Chapter 1, pages 7 through 17. Hagar's pregnancy. Back in Canaan, after numerous adventures and another decade of infertility, Sarah recognizes Abraham's yearning for a child. Actually a son. The setting is the patriarchal Late Bronze Age. Convinced that she, at age 90, was unlikely to conceive, Sarah places Hagar in Abraham's bed. The goal is for Hagar to have a child whom Sarah would then claim as her own. The Bible describes, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave whose name was Hagar, and Sarai said to Abram, 'You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave. It may be that I shall obtain children by her.' And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai." Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 2. Whether Hagar found this situation intolerable or as a move for social advancement goes unstated. In the Bible, stories don't repeat, they rhyme. That first unnamed Pharaoh in Genesis 12 took Sarah into his household and so enslaved her with the unstated goal of having intimate relations with her. In Genesis 16, Sarah does the same thing. She puts Hagar into Abraham's bed just as Abraham was willing to put her into Pharaoh's bed. Generations later, the Egyptians did to the Israelites in effect what Sarah did to Hagar, enslavement followed by both physical and psychological oppression. Trauma repeats through the family and through the years. Things do not work out the way Sarah planned. Hagar gets pregnant, and now we begin to see things from her perspective. The NRSVUE flaccidly states, "And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress." The Hebrew puns by saying, "the great lady," the Hebrew can also mean female ruler, "became light in her eyes." Genesis 16, verse 4. The expression lightweight fits. Not only does Hagar look down upon Sarah as infertile, as the pregnant Hagar gains weight, Sarah looks lighter in comparison. Sarah, furious, abuses Hagar, an earlier reference to domestic abuse. More, she complains to Abraham, "I gave my enslaved woman to your embrace." The Hebrew means bosom, not embrace. I think the translators have a problem with the word bosom, which we are speaking about intimate relationships. "And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt." Literally, I became light in her eyes. "May the Lord judge between you and me." Genesis 16, verse 5. Sarah wants Abraham to do something. In her view, the enslaved should be not only obedient, but also subservient. They should know their situation. Sarah's reaction is also a warning. Her rejection of Hagar, to whom she never speaks, shows that assertions of power or dignity by people in subordinated situations can have negative repercussions. Talk back to the CEO, and one's job can be in danger. Talk back to the professor, and one's grades may suffer. Talk back to law enforcement, and one might be handcuffed or killed. In Hagar's case, we may take the message that while dignity and agency are to be desired, gloating is not the best form of subversive freedom. Abraham refuses to intervene. He observes, "Your slave is in your power," literally in your hand. "Do to her as you please," literally what seems good in your eyes. Genesis 16, verse 6a. I find this comment highly problematic. The literal reading, "in your hands," makes a versatile impression. It may be by Sarah's hand that Hagar is struck or whipped. First, we see through Hagar's eyes that Sarah became light. Now we see through Sarah's eyes the possibilities of abuse. Hagar is pregnant with Abraham's child, and he doesn't appear to care about either her or the baby, nor does he care about Sarah. He offers no word of love or comfort. His coldness anticipates the coldness of the Egyptians who, as we have seen, find no compunction against killing infants. This text and verse require discussion. Hagar is enslaved to Sarah, and her status is reaffirmed by everyone from Abraham to Sarah to an angel Hagar encounters, even by Hagar herself. Genesis 16, verse 1 introduces her as Sarah's property. Sarah had an Egyptian slave whose name was Hagar. In the next verse, Sarah tells Abraham to go in to my slave. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. Genesis 16 verse 3 explains that Sarah took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave, and gave her to Abram as a wife. In 16 verse 5, Sarah complains to Abraham, I gave my slave to your embrace. The narrative then returns to Hagar's enslaved status. Genesis 16 verse 6b states that Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. The Hebrew verb underlying dealt harshly comes from the term ani, meaning to abuse, afflict, oppress, humiliate. The noun ani shows up in other occasions where God responds to desperate situations. In the Moses story, Exodus chapter 3 verse 7 offers, Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery, ani, of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings. Hagar the Egyptian slave, who suffered under Sarah's hand, finds connections to the Israelites who suffer under the hands of the Egyptians. No group is innocent of oppression. No group fails to have experienced oppression. The term ani also has economic implications. When God pays attention to suffering and condemns abusive practices, the focus can also concern poverty and attendant social issues. Food and housing instability, vulnerability, often despair. On occasion, the term ani is paired with ger, not native born, as in Moses' son Gershom, stranger there. Leviticus 19:10 insists, You shall not strip your vineyard bare or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor, ani, and the alien, ger. We're returned to the term ani in chapter 4, where we find its Greek translation in Mary's Magnificat. The Bible does not hide social sins. Sex trafficking, murder, incest, abuse of weaker members of the household, the ignoring of abuse by people who could step in, hear Abraham. The Bible tells these stories not for reasons of prudence. It tells them so that victims can feel empowered to come forward. It tells them so that victims know that they are not alone. More, it tells them so that the perpetrators can face their own responsibilities and ideally seek forgiveness, attempt reconciliation, and make restitution when they can. The Annunciation of Hagar. Hagar flees from Sarah's hand, and we readers, together with the angel of the Lord, find her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. Genesis chapter 16, verse 7. The text sounds like a travel guide, as if the reader, map in hand, finds the spring on the Shur highway. Geographical notices are also intertextual resonances. The wilderness reappears where the Israelites spend 40 years between slavery in Egypt and the entry into the Promised Land. Exodus 15:22 reports that Moses ordered Israel to set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. We know from Genesis 16 that they will find water eventually. Fleeing from oppression, they are not the first, and they will not be the last. It's a cliche to state that we have wilderness moments when we feel deserted, pun intended. But it is also in the desert, without the distractions of civilization, of quotidian duties, that we can feel closer to God. Or we can better understand what we need to do or even who we are. When John the Baptizer called people from their homes to the wilderness to reassess their relationship to God, he knew what he was doing. When Jesus enters the wilderness to face temptation, he can remind us of Hagar in both being dependent on God for sustenance and in returning to a life of both joy and suffering. The angel states, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Genesis 16, verse 8. He knows, even reinforces her identity. She is Hagar. Hebrew, Hagar, the stranger or alien or immigrant. She is the outsider, in all manner of speaking, to Abraham's camp. More, she is enslaved. At the same time, this foreign, pregnant slave of Sarah encounters the divine. This foreign woman is in the desert, where nationality is of limited or no value. She is enslaved, and yet she is not in the household that enslaved her. Her identity is changing in this wilderness moment. Hagar responds, I'm running away from my mistress, female ruler Sarai. Genesis 16:8. Hagar misses the irony. That she was able to run suggests that Sarah's power is limited. More, Hagar answers the first part of the question, Where have you come from?" But she has not answered fully. She has come from Egypt. She has come from a house of slavery. Nor does she answer the second part of his question at all. Where are you going? She cannot yet see herself as going to freedom or to her own identity, or even perhaps back to Egypt. Nor is she going alone. She has to care not only for herself, but also for her unborn child. I would like at this point for the angel to arrange an intervention. He could, with Hagar, return to Sarah and Abraham, encourage Sarah to apologize for mistreating Hagar, seek reconciliation, and then give Hagar the choice of where she wants to live. But no, the angel orders Hagar not just to return, but to return to your mistress and submit to her. Genesis chapter 16, verse 9. The Hebrew is more versatile. Return to your woman ruler and be afflicted, ani, beneath her hand. Excuses have been offered to explain this dreadful sentence. To claim that the angel is concerned about the baby, I'm not buying them. If God can provide manna and quail for the Israelites in the wilderness, God can provide for Hagar. To claim that the angel hopes for a reconciliation between Sarah and Hagar, or for Abraham's showing care for Hagar, I don't see this possibility. At least the Bible does not state that Sarah continued to abuse Hagar. It is possible that Hagar considers the angel's directive and now behaves in the subservient manner Sarah wants. Yet following this instruction, the situation is no longer the same. Hagar has encountered an angel. Her story tells us that God sees us not just when we pray, but when we are too tired, too thirsty, too oppressed to pray. Then comes the good news. The angel tells Hagar that her offspring will be so numerous that they cannot be counted. Genesis 16, verse 10. The NRSV UE offers, "I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude." The Hebrew, again, is more emphatic. Multiplying, "I will multiply your seed that they cannot be counted for the multitude." This is the same promise God made to Abraham in Genesis 13:16. "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted." Hagar will not be the last of her generation. Her children will be as numerous as those of Abraham and Sarah. It is not through her son that the biblical covenant continues. But that does not mean his story ended. Islam has different and more extensive stories of Ishmael, including the note that he was the direct ancestor of Muhammad. The angel next tells her that the baby will be a boy, no surprise, and that she is to call him Ishmael. I cannot help but think here of Moby Dick. The name means God hears. The Shama root is the same as we find in the call, "Hear, Shema, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone," Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. The Hebrew El means God, as in El Alin or El Shaddai. The angel explains the name. The child is to be called Ishmael because God has heard, or as the NRSV translates, has given heed to your affliction, Ani, Genesis 16, verse 11. This is the affliction to which God pays heed. This is the affliction that needs to be redressed. God hears the cries of any afflicted person. We can imagine that. If God is just, redress will occur somehow. The angel continues, "He shall be a wild ass of a man, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all his kin." Genesis 16, verse 12. Again, I'm not thrilled with this prediction. I would not appreciate someone telling me when I was pregnant, "You'll have a wild ass." Better something like, "He'll be a librarian," or "She'll be a hotel corporate sales executive." On the other hand, the prediction is one of complete freedom. Unlike his mother, Ishmael will not be enslaved, whether legally or socially. He will do what he wants, on his own terms. Nor are such predictions necessary indications of one's fate. Genesis is not the tragedy of Oedipus, predicted to kill his father and marry his mother, which, despite the efforts of his parents to prevent his fate, is exactly what happens. Classics gives us tragedies, while the Bible is, in the formal classification of genre, more often a comedy in that differences are often reconciled and there is a happy ending of sorts. Ishmael is not fully as the angel describes him. According to Genesis chapter 25, verse 9, Isaac and Ishmael together bury their father Abraham in the cave of Machpelah. Here, Ishmael is hardly at odds with all his kin. The modification of the prediction sends us forward to Jesus. Gabriel tells Mary about her son. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David. Luke chapter 1, verse 32. The prediction has yet to come fully to fruition. More important, missing here is the notice of Jesus' death. Gabriel provides Mary good news. It will be Simeon in Luke 2, verse 35, who tells Mary that a sword will pierce her own soul. Predictions can be partial. They are not the full story. Genesis 16 now turns from emphasizing hearing to a concern for seeing. In Genesis 16, verse 13, Hagar named the Lord who spoke to her, "You are El Roi," for she said, "Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him?" What a glorious verse! Hagar, the pregnant enslaved woman, taken from her home in Egypt, placed into Abraham's bed, and then abused by Sarah, becomes the first person in the Bible to name God. This is no ethnocentric text. It is one that opens revelation to any and all. The angel tells Hagar what to name her son, but she names God. She calls God El, again, the generic word for God, Roi, pronounced according to the vowels later put into the Mesoteric text. Roi rhymes with go see rather than koi or boy. Thoughts of the sun and the Jetsons are permitted only for the sake of nostalgia. The name means God who sees, or God sees. The question Hagar asks means something like, "Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him?" It's a good question, given that in Exodus chapter 33, verse 20, God tells Moses, "You cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live." That is, except when they do. Her Hebrew literally reads, "Is it also here that I have seen after he has seen me?" To know that we are seen, really seen, whether by God or a friend, a lover, a student, changes our self-perception, whether for good or for ill. The point is not to think of God like Santa, who sees us when we're sleeping and knows when we're awake and is keeping a naughty to nice tally. The point is that we are noticed, and in that notice we are valued. By seeing and by being seen, Hagar's self-worth is heightened. Hagar's naming is remembered. The narrator notes that the well where she encountered the angel was called Ber Lahi Roi, the well Ber of the living one. Lakai is in the Hebrew toast Lakaim, to life, who sees me, Roi. On the map, it's between Kadesh and Bered, Genesis 16, verse 14, and Kadesh will figure in Israel's wilderness journey. For example, see Numbers 20. This part of the story ends with the notice that Hagar bore Abraham a son, and that Abraham named him Ishmael, Genesis 16, verse 15. The narrator 3 times mentions that Hagar gave birth to the child. Hagar bore Abraham a son. Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Hagar bore, Hagar bore, Hagar bore. Genesis 16, verses 15 through 16, emphasis added. She's doing all the work. She cannot be forgotten. Finally, unless Abram had a chat with an angel that went unrecorded, Hagar told him what to name the boy. He listened to the voice of his wife. Here, his wife Hagar. God has heard. The tag at the end is that when the baby was born, Abram was 86 years old. God bless him.